Aloha and good morning. It is June 11th. This is the COVID-19 care conversation on the platform of the Honolulu Star Advertiser, brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health. I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji, joined by Yanji Denise, and we want to welcome all of you for tuning in here to this conversation and being a part of what has been an ongoing conversation where we connect you, the viewers of the Honolulu Star Advertiser, and the public with leaders and resources needed to navigate through this COVID-19 pandemic. Yanji, we have yet another guest here that will be joining us today to share a little bit more about their efforts in this overall campaign as we navigate, as I said, through COVID-19.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We're going to be joined by Ikaika Hussey, who is here representing Uplift Hawaii. That is a group of business and community leaders that are working on an economic recovery plan, basically trying to figure out how we can steer Hawaii's economic future so that it is more inclusive and so that it literally uplifts all of us. A very interesting cross-section of people that are coming together. We see leaders in labor, but also leaders in the business community and different small business owners all coming together to try to figure out what Hawaii's economy should look like post-COVID. We've seen so many people lose their jobs, and now we understand that the delay on reopening tourism is going to be extended even longer. So given those delays and given the constraints and given that we have no vaccine, how does Hawaii get itself out of our economic situation? We're going to be talking to Ikaika Hussey in just a few minutes. So we really look forward to that conversation. And we want to tell you how you can participate and be a part of helping to shape that future as well. But first, Ryan, we always like to start with the count.
That's right. So 4 new cases that were reported on Wednesday, and actually 1 was removed from the overall total. So the total cases in Hawaii since the outbreak began is at 685 positive cases. Again, there was no new deaths reported, and of the 57,000 COVID tests that have been conducted by the state and clinical laboratories, only about 1.2% have been positive. So you look at the numbers, and Dr. Bruce Anderson from the Department of Health continue to talk about those efforts that the state is doing to test more people and really provide a more comprehensive look at sort of the case and the case count here in Hawaii. We know that testing will be a critical piece and component of reopening Hawaii, as we hear from the governor about the extension of the banned, or I should say the 14-day quarantine for those out-of-state visitors.
Yeah, we were watching the governor's press conference late yesterday afternoon, and it was really interesting. I was watching a lot of the comments, and there are a lot of mixed emotions when it comes. And we know that this is the big issue right now. When do we open our economy? When do we allow visitors to come without those restrictions? And when we do that, how do we make it safe? The governor basically looking at what's happening in the Western U.S. in particular, because that is such a big market for Hawaii, and saying, no, not yet. You see increases of cases in California and in Arizona in particular. The numbers in Arizona are pretty staggering. So he's decided to hold off. But I saw a lot of people writing in from the business community yesterday, and individuals saying, we need our jobs back. We need to open now. And that's why we want to welcome our guest, Ikaika Hussey, is here. He is a community organizer and a small business owner, and he's representing Uplift Hawaii to tell us what Hawaii's economic future should look like as we move forward. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us a little bit about Uplift Hawaii. What is it, and how did it come together?
Sure. So Uplift Hawaii is one of several coalitions that have come together in the last several weeks, sort of organically. I would say that it's recognizing that we're all living in this this kind of strange new world, right? And there are so many folks that have been talking about, what does the pivot look like? What does the transition look like? How do we do it in a manner that's just? And so the group sort of came together organically. With some anchors, of course, and from there we collaborated. It's a very diverse group of people: social justice folks, business community, and what we've seen is a very concise set of 5 principles, around the basic ideas that Hawaii's economy needs to help everyone here, has to help all local people. We actually need a new vision for things like tourism. We need to make sure that our natural environment is taken care of and is a real foundation for the future of our economy. So, it's it's a very important process that I think we're all going to be engaged in over the next several months.
Who's involved in this conversation and these discussions that have formulated what has become Uplift Hawaii?
So it's a very diverse group. For instance, it includes folks from Hawaii Appleseed, which is a think tank that engages very closely on policy around social justice. Making sure that low-income individuals, for instance, have the kind of housing and the basic needs that community needs. I was there representing sort of a labor angle, labor perspective. There's also people from the clean energy sector. And to me, that's a very important element here, because we know that not only do we have COVID to deal with, but we know that within the next 10 years, we have to transition our entire economy such that we're dealing with climate change. The United Nations came out with a report a couple of years ago saying that we basically have a decade to make a massive shift in the way that we do business in order to make sure that we have a sustainable economy for future generations. So all these different pieces coming together, I think, will help us to imagine a very different kind of economic model.
And let's talk a little bit about that model. I know you mentioned that, Hawaii does have to make a pivot. If COVID is with us and if we have these restrictions on our tourism economy, what kind of a pivot do you see? What's sort of the core of that?
I think at the core of it, for me personally, it has to be working people. We can't have an economy where the few are benefiting at the expense of the many. And what we see right now in terms of the current discussions around the reopening is, especially within the confines of the tourism, the hospitality industry, is a conversation where really workers are being left behind, and that concerns me. Was it last week? Local 5, or 2 weeks ago, Local 5 did a large caravan through Waikiki with the message of basically that in order to reopen, that we have to keep the issues of frontline workers at the front of our minds, that we need to prioritize basic safety for the workers that are to be engaged with the guests. And that also we shouldn't be using the safety rhetoric, that the hotel owner should not be using the safety rhetoric as an excuse to cut a bunch of jobs. That really the benefit of tourism to the economy is to the extent to which it creates good local jobs. And if we're not going to be doing that, then we need to really rethink our commitment to tourism.
So in this process, as you guys, sort of have these discussions and bring together these different stakeholders from various industries to engage in mapping out what this looks like, what does that realistically look like in terms of implementation of policy, in terms of really trying to engage people through educational pieces? What are you folks envisioning in how you sort of take the information and resources and everything that you've gathered together as an organization and really implement that into change in our economy and beyond?
So Uplift Hawaii is inviting public comment in the materials that we put up on the website. And what I'm most interested personally is when we move from this current phase where we're looking at kind of big picture ideas to where we get to the point where we're actually talking about really tangible proposals, tangible projects in our community. And for instance, one that I'm thinking about a lot is with regards to the energy shift that we need to make. A lot of times when energy developers come to Hawaii, they immediately find themselves in a situation where they're fighting the community. You see it in Kahuku, with the protests over the wind farm there. And I'd like to see how we can engage platforms like Uplift Hawaii and also the Aina Aloha Economic Futures platform, which I'm also engaged in, to create a new kind of community conversation where community interests are placed first. How do we, for instance, in the Kahuku conversation, the question I would ask is, how do we set up a situation where the Kahuku residents would be the first and primary beneficiaries of new energy projects? And I think that those sort of engagements, those really tactical conversations in our community will be the foundation for an economy that really benefits everybody, all local people.
You know, when we see so many people filing for unemployment, so many people, these lines outside of Aloha Stadium lining up for food have just been staggering to see week after week, families, you know, in such desperate need. What do you think that this crisis has exposed about Hawaii's economy, and what are you folks hoping to change?
Well, you know, I went to volunteer at some of those food events, and I was really struck by how it wasn't, you know, we have a certain mental image, I think, of what a breadline looks like, right? I think we've all seen pictures of what a breadline looked like during the Depression in like big cities like New York or Detroit. But what I saw at the Aloha Stadium, or at the, like I went to the one in Waipio at the soccer field, is it was middle-class individuals driving nice vehicles, trying to feed their family in a moment of desperation. It wasn't the image that I think a lot of local people have when they think about what poverty and what desperation looks like. So my takeaway from this is that our economy is incredibly fragile, and in so much as we need to deal with the current problem of unemployment, I think we also need to be thinking ahead to the next issue, which is going to be healthcare. You know, right now we're probably a matter of weeks from thousands of people losing access to affordable healthcare. Then there's going to be a gap group between those folks who cannot afford to pay the full premium that COBRA would be available to them, but people who make more or just have too much assets to qualify for Medicaid. And this is a gap group which I think we need to first quantify, and then we also need to figure out a solution for in the very short term. You know, I think we're looking at a matter of weeks before this becomes a real serious problem.
And so, in your opinion, how do you solve things like that? Because, you know, a lot of the things that you're talking about is going to take time, and you know, just overall, just trying to change the direction of the economy and changing different industries. But at the same time, there are real needs that are in the community where people are going to need to get back to work. We're going to need to obviously open up hospitality. So how can you balance, you know, some of the things that need to happen now? People need work while also making this simultaneous shift into these different industries.
Well, in terms of healthcare, what I'm looking for is leadership, and specifically leadership from the legislature. And you know, if you look at the advertiser, what I see is really that politics has devolved into a fight, an internal fight between different factions within state government. You know, there's the administration battling the legislative leaders, and frankly, I think we could say that doesn't meet the needs of the people of Hawaii. I think Lee Cataluna was right that we need to fight for Hawaii, not fight each other. And so, you know, on a really tangible basis, I think that the state of Hawaii needs to launch a pilot program to address the short-term, the immediate need for healthcare for these unemployed individuals in this gap group between the Medicaid eligible and the COBRA people who can afford COBRA. And we need to set it up as a pilot. We need to do it now. Maybe we start on one of the neighbor islands where, you know, the population is more manageable. But this is a clear and present concern, I think, for our leaders, or at least it should be.
I think a lot of people feel a little voiceless right now. You know, they're just sort of overwhelmed. There's the physical fear, right, of getting sick, and then there's the economic fear. Just all of these things coming at you at once. But you talked about that community engagement piece, and I know you have a deadline for when people can try to participate in something like Uplift Hawaii. Tell us a little bit about what specific information you're looking for from the public, how they can get involved, and then what you're going to do with that information.
So members of the public are invited to go to uplifthawaii.org, and they can comment there. They can then go to you know, a web form where they can leave comments. And I think what we should be looking forward to in the next several weeks is the point where this becomes really targeted conversations in our community. And you know, I should mention also the Aina Aloha group, Aina Aloha Economic Futures, is also doing a process, which is a little bit different. It's more of a grassroots process, I would say, in the kind of emanating from the Native Hawaiian community. Yeah, so there's several opportunities to engage. Yeah.
And then what will you be taking that? Will you be taking that information to the legislature, the governor's office, heads of industry? I mean, what happens to all that commentary?
So, I would say that that there's a lot of people that we need to talk to. Frankly, we need to start, I think, talking amongst ourselves as a community, and then from there's the political leaders that we need to, I think, sort of bring along with us as the community expresses its need for leadership. There's also business leaders that need to be engaged, and some of them have been already, that have been involved in the conversations. There's also major institutions like our major landowners, who I think can also play a really key role in maybe acting faster than state government might be able to or might be willing to. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, Ikaika Hussey, thank you so much for taking time this morning to join us and sharing more information about Uplift Hawaii. Again, for those who are interested, we encourage you to visit your website, Uplift Hawaii, and thanks for engaging in this conversation. It's important, and it's something that everybody needs to sort of be aware of, and we appreciate your comments here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Aloha.
And if you want to get involved in that conversation, again, the website is uplifthawaii.org. There's a lot of people who are very frustrated and don't necessarily want to go back to business as usual. So how should Hawaii, what does the ship look like? How do we steer it in the right direction? That's a place to start. It's one way to engage. There's a number of ways to engage. We know a lot of people at the ledge. Also, a lot of the lawmakers have been doing a lot of Facebook Lives, have been asking people to communicate with them. So there are avenues, and that's part of why we do the show, is to bring this to you so that you find a way to make your voice heard.
That's right. And of course, we always like to also talk about some of the other headlines that are happening here in the state. But this time we're going to start maybe more on a national level, as the United States hit another grim milestone today with 2 million coronavirus cases in the United States. And we mentioned this at the top of the broadcast, with some states seeing a surge of patients that are entering the hospitals. Now, as of Thursday morning, more than 112,000 people have died from COVID-19 in the United States. It's the most fatalities reported by any nation. So definitely a milestone that that the United States is not proud of owning this distinction. We also talked about Arizona. Numbers for there. Arizona has reported an average of more than 1,000 new cases every day this week, and it's the highest per capita rate in the United States. They're saying that they're about a quarter hospital beds that remain available at this time, but that they are filling up fast. We also talked about California. They had 2,871 new cases and closing in on 5,000 deaths since the outbreak began. So a lot of these numbers continue to grow. And again, that then leads to the conversation of how do we reopen the state of Hawaii to these markets and to these states that obviously see a lot of people coming in and out of, and what does travel look like to the islands with these cases currently rising on the mainland?
Yeah, that 14-day quarantine, as we mentioned, for the Trans-Pacific travelers has been extended through July 31st. What's interesting is that does not necessarily mean that tourism opens August 1st. It just means that quarantine lasts until the end of July. We're going to be talking to the governor again on Monday to get more of his thinking in terms of what this actually looks like. There's a lot of talk about travel passports. They're not calling it travel bubbles anymore. They're calling these travel corridors. So this is, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, perhaps a number of states on the mainland. The challenge there is that someone from another state can just drive to an airport in a state with low cases. So it's a very difficult puzzle, and that's why we bring the governor on to talk about that. When he was on Monday, he did mention Arizona specifically as part of his thinking in terms of why the state needs to still have this quarantine in place. But we know a lot of you are frustrated that hotels need to reopen and people need to get back to work, and so this balance is really tough. Another area that is pretty complicated, of course, is athletics. And so tomorrow we're having the UH athletic director on to talk about how they're going to have teams playing and what these conferences are going to look like.
Yeah, a lot of discussion over really even just the audience participation. Will fans be allowed to enter stadiums and arenas once again? And how does travel and what does travel look like for the athletes, especially here in Hawaii? Now, there have been talks in some conferences and schools on the mainland where they're thinking about doing sort of sectors or locations and areas where the teams, say in California and Southern California, will all play each other regardless of the conferences for their non-conference matches, and albeit in all those other states. But when you're a state like Hawaii and there's only one team on the island, it becomes difficult to sort of figure out how that happens. So we're excited to talk to David Matlin to learn a little bit more about some of the conversations that's happening. I think a lot of those discussions are still ongoing and conferences are still trying to figure out how they're going to manage that. But certainly that is a big part also of the financial budget. Of course, the athletic department brings in revenue also to able to sustain their department. So when you're not able to do ticket sales and when you're not able to make money off merchandising, that will impact the overall budget. And just one of the sectors of the many industries here in the state that are seeing a direct hit because of this shutdown.
The governor also, in terms of the economics, talked yesterday about the jobless claims. 88% of jobless claims have been paid. That's a significant increase. There's still a number of people who need money and have not had those jobless claims resolved. So we were happy to see that there was that increase. Also, he did talk about Director Murakami. We know a number of you have asked questions about why he's not on this program. He's taking a leave as directed by the governor. I think that, his job has been incredibly stressful. And so he's taking some time, from what we understand, to sort of readjust and give himself a break. But that doesn't mean that the Labor Department is not open. They are still filing claims. They are still, operating those call centers. And hopefully they can get to that other 12% very soon.
And, we have set up sort of a relationship with the Department of Labor because of the fact that we have been, doing these conversations once a week with Director Murakami. And so we will actually be doing sort of a Q&A with them. No one will necessarily be on our show, but we are submitting questions that have been coming in and continue to come in about specific areas in the unemployment area. So if you have questions that, regards to unemployment, please enter them in the comments. We will be submitting some of those questions over to the department, they will then provide us with some answers and some guidance for some people who continue to seek some answers. So they have allowed us to sort of have that conduit to continue that conversation even without Director Murakami there. So we're thankful that they're open to receiving some of the questions that we know many of you are still waiting for. So we encourage all of you, if you still have questions about unemployment, enter them into the comment sections. We will go through them and send them a bunch of questions that are coming in directly from you and hope to provide you answers on a later broadcast.
We love to see the comments. We see that you guys are engaged right now. Ingrid Peterson saying we need monthly federal dollars directly to the people to help people and keep our economy going. Federal help is definitely on our minds as well. And that's why next week, Senator Brian Schatz is going to be joining us from Washington on Friday. Hopefully, he will have an update for us in terms of what the federal government is doing. Will there be more PPP money? Will there be another CARES Act? How do we move forward from this? So we're very excited to talk to the senator, and we will bring those questions to him. We always like to end the day rather on a positive note, and we want to highlight our Hawaii hero of the day. Today it's the YMCA Honolulu. The YMCA does amazing work all the time, but especially right now they've been providing free, healthy grab-and-go lunches to kids 18 and under, Monday through Friday, since March. That's, of course, thanks to the generous support of the Hawaii Community Foundation's Resilience Fund. They've distributed 48,000 free lunches in 2 months. You see some of the kids there preparing some food. So wonderful to see that. And we mahalo our Hawaii hero of the day, YMCA Honolulu.
That's right. And again, we would encourage you to let us know what are some of the good things that are happening in your community and that are happening right now in Hawaii. And we recognize that there are a lot of people that have needs and there's a lot of people that are doing good. So we always like to shed a positive light on some of that aloha that is being spread throughout the islands. We also want to encourage all of you to tune in again tomorrow for our conversation with UH Athletic Director David Matlin. And then again, next week, we have another full lineup with, again, Governor Ige will be here. We'll be speaking to Senator Brian Schatz. We will also be talking to Mayor Kirk Caldwell. We haven't had an update from him in some time, but we are excited to have him back on this show to talk a little bit more about the city's efforts. We know that next week is another big weekend milestone for the island of Oahu, as some of these other establishments are allowed to open, such as gyms and movie theaters and some of these other establishments that are sort of the last on the list. And so getting an update from him on some of those rollouts and how the city is planning for that as well.
Yeah, so think of the questions you have and make sure that you put them in the comments. We love to get the questions ahead of time if we can, because that way we can kind of, prepare and go through them. So if you've got questions for any of those guests, let us know. Of course, join us live and ask your questions in person. That works as well. We wish you a very happy Aloha Thursday. Join us, as Ryan said, tomorrow on Friday. The paper's got some great information today, so go on over there, take a look at all of their articles. Some really interesting write-ups on tourism and what is happening to our tourism economy, especially now that we know the shutdown is lasting through the end of July. Some sobering statistics in there today, but great information overall. And of course, we thank them as giving us this platform, and also their reporters over there who are doing tremendous work to keep all of us informed.
That's right. So until tomorrow, we wish you all a happy Thursday. Be safe, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Aloha.